Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Full View, focusing on trans masks in media, the podcast where we shine a light on the lack of trans masculine representation in entertainment. We're your hosts,
Avi Roque.
and Yas Moderis Kasiri. And today we're doing a very special Halloween watch party. Wow, that came out like such a.
Spooky.
I was thinking like a 90s gun car, like watch party. And so today we're going to break down the trans masculine representation of Raúl.
Raúl. Yeah, I mean, in Spanish, right? It's like, I feel
Right.
like there's different ways where it's like Raúl, right? I think. Well,
Yeah.
meaning like,
Yeah.
listen, all right? I'm not a native Spanish speaker, okay? But in the
Uh,
movie, they do say Raúl. Like
okay.
Raúl. They say it kind of Raúl. Wow. Okay, not the whole
I
episode being us
I think I
pronouncing the
know.
name.
'Cause I was gonna say, I think the real test would be how did his mom say it in the movie?
Right.
That's the
Raúl.
way. Okay. Oh, but for this character is we haven't even gotten to the movie, is from the movie Wendell and Wild. There will be spoilers ahead, so if you wanna really get into this episode with us, go to Netflix. No, we're not sponsored by Netflix. It's just where it is. Have a watch and join us for a little trans mass spookiness.
There you go. Ooh.
Oh.
Okay. Let's just talk a little bit about the film. So, Wendell and Wild is a 2022 stop motion animated horror comedy about Kat, a teenager enrolled at an all girls Catholic school who becomes entangled with two demons, Wendell and Wild, after trying to resurrect her dead parents. Along the way, Raúl, Cocolotl. Okay, see, this is the other thing. This is in Nahuatl, which is
Mm,
one of the most common indigenous languages of Mexico. So that's
mm.
the origin of this last name. You know, like an axolotl?
Yeah,
But it's almost like
maybe.
with that TL. I have a hard time actually
Yeah.
capturing that. Cocolotl?
Look,
Lotl.
I don't think little.
Cocolotl. Okay, well, wow, this is a whole episode on the language.
Yeah.
But anyways, this character, this is the meat where we really want to like highlight is a trans boy, right? Raul is a trans boy and Kat's friend. And Raul plays a central role in the story and in this film, artistically, emotionally, and in confronting the corrupt forces like Klaxcorp, threatening their town. This film, it blends supernatural thrills with real stakes around identity, family, grief, and resistance.
And I think what's so great about the character is that we got to say, or you got to say, all of that about a trans masculine character. And so this character was really rich, and the way they handled it was really awesome. And it's also, I almost feel like the theme for this season unintentionally is like the first person
Mm-hmm.
to do this, the first to do this. Raul is the first trans character, I think, masc or femme,
Mm-hmm.
in stop motion, which
Yeah.
is a really huge moment for animation history. And what's great too is they did have a trans masculine actor
Mm-hmm.
voice the role.
Absolutely. And I feel like in our research, didn't you find that cute little narrative? I mean, it's not cute, but it's like incredible the story of how
Mm.
the actor even came across this
Yeah.
project.
Yeah. So the actor is Sam Zalea. I was hoping you were going to tackle the name again.
Sam Zelaya. We were looking this up, okay? Let
We
me tell
tried. We
you,
tried to look it up.
because we do care about pronouncing things correctly.
Us with our names of all people.
Literally,
We
I'm so self-conscious about that. I'm like, I need to make sure I'm pronouncing your name
me too.
right.
So Sam, we
We
apologize if
apologize.
we get your name wrong. But Sam is a trans man. Again, found he him pronouns. So again, at this point, feel free to message us if things
Yes.
along your journey change or if we
Yes.
are idiots.
Yes. Yes.
So Sam is a trans Latino actor, and something that I found in, I should have cited my sources, an article, an interview, maybe on Medium, is that as an actor who is Latino and trans, he felt like both of those were barriers to
Mhm.
his identity.
Mhm.
And then he saw the casting call.
Mm.
And something I think is really awesome, especially given our episode from 2 weeks ago with Brian Michael Smith, which, if you haven't listened to, it's very inspirational. Definitely check it out. But a huge theme of that episode was authenticity, is showing up as you are. But that's when things start to happen. And I think that's really awesome to then see that these two identities that Sam mentioned in the interview that he felt were a barrier are
Mhm.
actually are what broke down the barrier.
Exactly, and celebrated in this
Mhm.
context. I mean, I definitely relate to that. I mean, being Latina and, being trans, I just feel like those are, like, 2 areas that are really full of stereotypes,
Mhm.
or, like, that idea of what being Latina is and what being trans is. So it's like, "Oh, okay, cool."
Yeah, that's yeah, I mean, being Persian,
Right.
it's like we're not even, like, on anywhere.
Right.
Like, what's
Right.
the yeah, it's like, what's the terrorist trope
Right.
died off, which
Yeah.
is, like, good, but then the representation, which is like I said in the first episode, I was on a panel for that too. So
Right.
now I'm kind of all like, I just gotta manifest a trans Persian
Correct.
character that's trans masked Persian.
Exactly. Yes, and maybe that's what Sam did. Maybe Sam was like, "Okay, I
Mm,
know this isn't working for me, but my goodness," manifesting, like what Brian said around, being specific and clear, and
mhm.
maybe that popped up, but it popped up for Sam, and Sam auditioned and got the part.
Which is incredible. I mean, it's a claymation film produced by Jordan Peele. I mean, it's
Yeah.
huge, which is actually also really cool that I don't know if, like, the term horror applies to, like,
Right.
children's stuff.
Mm.
Like, I wouldn't call Nightmare Before Christmas a horror film, right?
Right.
It's like Hocus Pocus.
Right.
It's like
Right.
spoOOoooOoky. That's, like, the
It's
genre.
festive of the
Yes,
season.
of the Halloween season. And what's also cool is there's a level of surrealism too, which
Mhm.
Kat is a young Black girl and we follow her story.
Yeah.
But also, I know magical realism is a big part of, like, Latina culture. So I think that was a very cool way to mix it in. And what's actually interesting is that so the way this character came to be, because I actually feel like I'm like, this is the kind of character that, like, at the end of every panel, where I'm always, I ask the same question where I'm like, oh, what do you want to see? And
Mm.
everyone's just like, I just want to see a trans person living. I don't want to
Exist,
see it
yeah.
about, yeah, like the transition story or the trauma. And this is that. It's
Mhm.
a trans person who exists. What's actually really cool is how the character came to be is director and writer Henry Selick, who you might know him from doing Coraline. He based his this movie on his own unpublished book,
Mhm.
which isn't that's interesting in itself, but that's not the part I'm excited about. Um, he so basically he had this whole moment of, like, he wanted to write a male identifying character in at an all girls school,
Mm.
and so he was like, "How do I do that?" And he was like, "I'll just make him a trans boy."
Mm.
And I think what's so cool about that is that he had the character and I'm sure he had an idea of what he wanted, and there was a reason for wanting this character. And then he layered transness on top at the end, kind of like the icing on the cake.
Mhm.
I think that might be honestly one of the reasons, like, this is such a rich character, is because I think sometimes I find this in my own writing too, is sometimes you go into the identity of it where
Mm.
you're like, I want to tell a trans story and I want to be about a trans person. And then, like, then there's no, and we've seen that too. And, uh, but, there's underwritten trans characters a lot of the time, and I think it comes down to they're written for the sake of identity,
Right.
and something, I know people brought this up in, like, political discourse or back and forth, where someone was saying, like, the word
Mm.
trans, and I think it was actually some, like, cishet guy in, like, a comment. He's like, the word trans is an adjective, just like there are trans men, good men, and bigoted men
Mm.
like you, that kind of thing, where it is a descriptor that comes in and it shapes us a lot, right?
Uh,
But I think that's one of the reasons why, because he didn't set out to be like, I'm gonna just insert a trans character to have a trans character. He had a character, and then the transness came after, and I
right.
think that's one of the reasons it's such a rich character.
Yeah, I like that. But it makes me think about too, like, it could have been a trans girl. It could have been a trans femme, like, person, but,
Mm.
like, at an all-girls school. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
But
yeah, yeah,
because it was like, I want a male character, so then the it just became, "Okay, well, this is that story that I can tell and make the character
mhm,
trans, but it's not about being trans," right? Like, there's
yeah,
so much more to Raul.
yeah. Exactly, and I think they wanted that perspective, I feel like, too, in when, like, if for writing and because I know sometimes maybe cis people feel like, "Oh, can I write in a trans person or write about a trans person if
Mhm,
I'm not trans?"
mhm.
And I think this is done so well because I'm sure they probably coordinate, like, talk to people because a lot of the moments are really great, but, like, the point he didn't actively be like, "I wanna put a trans person." He's like, "Okay, I'm just gonna make them trans because that person's a male identifying person. That's how
Right.
they're gonna think like a boy, and I want a boy at an all-girls school, so they're
There
trans."
you go. Yeah. I mean, definitely problem solved.
Yeah, and so I guess, like, we keep talking about how Raul is such a rich character, but I guess we should probably tell people, especially if they didn't watch it,
Yes,
because he's creative. That's actually a huge part of the story is that he's creative, but he's also very emotionally intelligent,
absolutely.
and he's a good friend too.
Mhm.
But what I also love is he's flawed.
Mm.
And I think that's really important too, just for good storytelling and good writing.
Mhm. Like, fully human. And I
Mhm,
think I love, like, this, like again, the trans things are subtle. Like, what we're talking about
mm,
right now is, like, the personality, and I always think about that too with casting of, like, talk about the
mhm,
personality traits of someone, not, like, all these
yeah,
identity markers. And you're right, I feel like Raul's a real
yeah,
one
he
in
is,
this
yeah.
film.
Yeah, I think actually I feel like you, like, unlock something in my brain. That's such an interesting thing to with casting because we talked on our first episode about how, like, we all get called in for the same thing.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'm glad that they're like, "We want a trans person in trans role." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Cool. Step 1 is done." But we all have headshots and real material that all clearly convey well, maybe not everyone has the best materials or needs to update stuff, but, like, the goal is you have your materials that convey who you are as an actor and what you can bring to a role, so
Mhm.
there isn't like, unless the writers are just like and producers are like, "We just are there any trans people who are good actors? We'll change the world for them, just bring anybody in."
Right.
There isn't actually a reason to call in
Right.
every trans person.
Right. Yeah. One of those barriers, though, still that we're navigating, and it does still happen, but I mean, again, we're all humans. Again, we're
Mhm,
humans, multifaceted, like, we're also actors, right?
mhm,
So it's like we're forgetting that. But I mean, to like pull it back to like all of these very humanistic qualities is, you named creative, you said emotionally intelligent, a great friend. So there's loyalty present. I mean,
yeah,
empathy, like so empathetic,
mm,
grounded, brave, and also just like when I was watching, I just feel like, again, it's, like, such a natural portrayal of just a person and being a
mhm.
teenager too, but
Yeah,
also the layer of being trans. Like, again, those weren't the main points, but there were pepperings and smatterings throughout the
yeah,
film where we
mhm.
got to be like, "Oh, yeah, right, cool. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
you're
I
trans."
totally agree. Right, and I thought that was there I feel like there's so many great ways it was handled because like, I think without those moments, I don't know if it would've we would've known he was a trans boy or
No, I think honestly the first time I watched it, I think it kinda went over my head a little bit. I did, and then I
yeah.
think when I watched it, with my wife, I think later she's like, Raul was trans." I was like, "What?" Oh, okay, I wasn't paying attention.
That's so interesting because I went into it being like, I have to find something for the podcast to talk about,
Right,
and, like, so I went in obviously knowing
right,
because like, the first moment is really just kinda subtle, and I think it's actually, like, a really cool way. So I guess, like, we said it was a watch party, so to give a little bit more context of the story. So Kat, her parents died in
right.
this, like, it's kind of
A
Beetlejuicy
little
car
bit, a
crash.
car crash off a
Yeah.
bridge, right.
Yeah. And she thought it was her fault because she, like, screamed as like, at something, like a worm in her apple as a
Mhm.
little girl, and the dad he didn't have to turn the wheel, like, and
Right.
look back,
Right.
which is the point, right? It's not her fault, but she thinks it is, so she's in and out of juvenile detention centers, foster care homes, and
Right.
this all girls school. They sign up for a program to get like money from the government to be like rehabilitate
Right.
people, right?
Mhm.
And so she's immediately bombarded by this group of girls
Yes.
who are like she calls like the poodles.
Right. A la Mean Girls, a la Heathers.
Yeah, yeah, very like, oh my god, like,
This
and
clique.
this, and she wants nothing to do with them. And Raul is just watching from above.
Yeah.
And he like, and I think that's some of a little bit of the flaws where he's isolated, he's
Right.
withdrawn from his community in
Mhm.
like the beginning of the film because he actually has a character arc, which is
Yes.
awesome.
Yes. We do see that at first. You're right.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
being alone, I feel like, yeah, almost isolated.
yeah,
Yeah, in his own little world.
and and there's something I always think is interesting where it's like you like that. I don't want to use the word clocking because
Mm.
Cat isn't trans, but you know, it's like you kind of be like, oh, we're kind of similar.
Right.
Like there's something like it. You can tell Raul knows there's like a something there,
Yeah.
and then we follow Kat a bit more. She gets like acclimated, but then we have the first like that first trans moment
Yes.
when this is the blonde girl's name.
It's
Uh,
Siobhan. The way that it happened was she's addressing Raoul, but dead names him, and then quickly corrects herself.
mm-hmm,
And I feel like that apology was very sincere. It felt like so honest and so
yeah,
real. And you know what I loved? And then that's it. It ended and like transitioned and faded into the next scene.
I totally agree. I thought that was such a great moment of like she's trying
Mhm.
and it's an adjustment
Mhm.
and Raul is giving her grace and also is firm enough in his identity
Yes.
where being dead
Yes.
names didn't break him.
1000%.
And of course everyone has their own experience with this, you know, there's no judgment if that is something that's heavy.
Yeah.
And of course it can depend on who that's coming from, but I just think that's also a really great thing for young trans people to see that it can happen and it doesn't take away from who you are.
Right. It
Yeah. And it
doesn't.
also showed like cis people like it's okay like you recovered yourself. I think that's also what I like, especially when I was using they them
Mhm.
pronouns. I was always like, you know, if you self-correct,
Yeah.
like that I can see that means you're trying in your own way.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's better than the awkwardness. So I think it was like a learning moment
Mhm.
with and an exposition to
Right.
establish these trans without hitting people over the head. Like clearly, you didn't even pick up on it the first
Uh,
time.
I must have been half asleep.
I mean, that literally could have been a scene where you sneezed and missed
It
it. You
could
know?
have been. It could have been. It was that quick. But again, you're right. But though it's like when people are, it's a learning curve, as you said, and when people are making the effort, it's you apologize and move on, right? You don't
Yeah.
make it a meal. You don't make it about you, right? And I feel
Mhm.
like that really encapsulated that real life moment that I've experienced. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've experienced, but I love what you said
Mhm.
about and that was a lesson I had to learn because I was very angry when I first was,
Mhm.
like, in my early stages of
Mhm.
transitioning. I was very upset when anyone misgendered me,
Yeah.
and I feel like over time, and then making more decisions for myself, I
Mhm.
I think eventually I realized, right, I know who I am. That's important. I feel firm and solid in that. I have no control over what anyone else says, does, or perceives me,
Yeah.
you know?
I One of the things that helps me is I misgender cis people all the time. I'm like, I don't know anyone's gender apparently. I'm like I was like, I can't tell you how many times I'll be walking with my girlfriend. I'm like, "Oh, look, baby, it's a lesbian couple." And she's like, "That's a man, baby." I was like, "Oh, okay." I don't So I think that helps me is I just misgender anybody.
It just
So
doesn't matter, all right? Anything
it does
goes.
yeah, it could be anything. But
Yeah.
I do think that's it. Like, I'm a really like big believer in life imitating art. I
Yes.
I don't think it's the other way around. I don't think like I'm sure art imitates life, but I
Sure.
think life imitating art's a huge thing, and like this is film history, right? I mean, if you go back to the Hays Code, also known as the production code,
Mm,
during the 20s and 30s, more 30s because it's like Great Depression. That's one of the reasons if you think of old films from the golden era, it's like everything's fine and dandy. You see, like gosh darn, there's a reason why, and it's because during the Depression, people didn't have those like nickels,
mm.
literally nickels. That's where Nickelodeon comes from.
Yes, yes.
It was a nickel to go to the theater, which they would have a heart attack if they found out how much it was. Like $25 was probably like 6 months of food back then. You know what I mean?
And still
Um,
the cost, it's still like what is it? Our minimum wage still does not equate to
it still doesn't
the
keep
cost
up.
of living. But anyways,
It's still
we
not livable,
digress.
right? But so during the Depression, religious people, I feel like right wing doesn't.
Okay,
I don't want to
sure.
be too politicized, but they came up. It was, I think, one of the like early moments of Catholics and Jews coming together to be like, we can pressure them into holding our ideals. And
Mm,
so that's when the production code came into, is the religious people basically blackmailed Hollywood, and they're like, you cannot swear. There has to always be clergy and cops and like authority figures always have to be seen and positive.
mm,
Women can never be equal to men. They have to be subservient to them. People of color have to be subservient to the white people in the film. You can't have quote unquote perversion, which was homosexuality. Like that's where that happened. And if you go to like, people don't think about this, but like this is such a tangent, but like before that, if you look up a Mae West film,
mm,
it's filthy. I mean, every word is an innuendo and like so much sexual stuff.
mm.
And like that's also why a lot of old Hollywood has such queer codedness, is
Right.
because then they had to code it.
Yes, yes.
And actually the production that was in place until like the 60s or 70s, because after World War II, because except for Pearl Harbor, like there was no battle on US soil and
Mm,
the economy did really well. That's why we became like the giants in film industry,
right,
because Europe was putting itself back
right.
together. And then when Europe could, they had so much trauma that they were making like really incredible dark films, and the US still couldn't do it. So that's why all of a sudden the 60s, like, or the 70s, like there's all of a sudden there's like nudity, violence, like people just went crazy, and then the rating system came in.
Ah,
Um,
the
and
rating
then
system.
the rating system, which fun facts, PG-13 exists because of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah, I was back in the day with DVDs and special
Wow,
features.
fun fact.
Yeah, because they didn't want an R rating, but they're like, it's too much for PG. So Steven Spielberg was like, could you do like a PG-13 or 14 or something? And
Interesting.
so,
Well,
yeah,
well, there you go.
yeah. But that's to say, without that representation or people seeing this is how you behave,
Yeah.
this is what masculinity and femininity, because they lit men and women differently.
Mhm.
Like you could have a male and female character in the same set in a Western, and they would be standing in front of the quote unquote same door, but the door in front of the woman was
Isn't
bigger
that
to make her look petite,
petite?
and smaller in front of the man to make him look manlier and bigger.
Wild.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're subliminally getting this through media, and like that's why I always say I don't think it's a coincidence that gay marriage was legalized after Modern Family, because
Right.
that was a lot of people's first introduction to a gay couple.
Right. No, it's like you're right. Like media and art is like so synonymous to like life and the world
Yeah,
and our living society. It really is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that like belief, that's really propelled me since like I took the college course. I think that's like what inspired me to make the panel, because so many of these trans moments are like so volatile,
Yeah.
so upsetting,
Yeah.
and to have a role model like Raúl who's like
Mhm.
dead named, and you're like, he's like, you can't hurt me with that.
Right.
That's, you're not impacting me.
Right. I got a
It's
little
just,
hint of like, I'm a little bothered and upset by that, but like whatever.
yes. Yeah, it definitely felt like that exacerbated, like, still,
Right. Right.
like,
Yeah,
still
like
that's
still
happening.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they don't give a timeline to the transition, I don't
No.
think.
Uh-uh.
Yeah, because there's the next moment,
Yes,
I think is with the
which I
mom in the
love.
film, right? Mhm,
Probably one of my favorite moments. Yeah, with the
yeah.
mom on the phone. So, the mom is in the legal world and is working on a case, which is the fire. There was a fire that happened at Kat's parents' brewery
Mhm.
after the accident, right?
Yeah,
After
after
they,
they died
yeah,
and Cat left,
yes.
yeah.
And so there's some shady stuff going on with the Claxons, Lane and
Mhm.
Irmgard, such names. And again, Siobhan, we talked about Siobhan earlier. Siobhan is the
Mhm,
daughter, one of the mean girls, Siobhan, is
mhm.
the daughter of Lane and Irmgard. But they're the Claxons, and they're literally trying to like, aren't they trying to like take over the town?
Yeah, because the brewery, I guess, kind of was like the heart and soul of the town, and things kind of kept falling apart. So they want to basically I believe, take the land and put a bunch of private prisons,
Right. Yeah.
which is also like really wild. Because I don't know if you know that I got my minor in criminology, law, and
What?
society.
I feel
Yeah.
so okay, I'm learning something new
I know.
every day.
So I think like it was really interesting and cool to bring in like the corrupt prison system. The problem with private prisons is that there's no financial incentive to rehabilitate people to go out into the world. They need people to keep coming back in
Mhm,
order to make money.
mhm.
So I just thought that was like really cool. Like kids like and like without the heavy trauma and baggage of really going into what that means.
Correct.
But I thought that was like a very cool way to introduce that concept. But anyway, I digress. You're
No,
saying the
you're
mom
no,
is
that's helpful because again, it reiterates, like, the
Mhm.
incredible job this film does of
Yeah.
introducing all of these very different elements that are reflective of our world today.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
mom, soft spot for mom.
Mhm.
I mean, mom clearly loves her kid, will
Mhm.
fight for her kid, will correct someone if anyone slips up. And that's what she does. There's a quick scene, again, subtle. She's on the
Mhm.
phone and someone on the other end, I assume, because we don't hear what they say, must again talk about Raul, but dead names, or maybe uses a she, her pronoun or something, or a
Mhm.
daughter maybe, because she says, son, my son,
Mhm.
remember?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what I loved about the moment too was because they were talking about the case,
Mhm.
and then I think she was gonna be, like, laid off or
Yes,
something,
there
right?
was that. Yes, getting
And
let
then she was
go.
like yeah, and she's like, "I have a son to take care of."
Yes.
And then I think what the person probably said was like, "Oh, I thought you had a daughter."
Yes.
A and then she was like, "Mama
No.
bear,
My son.
uh-uh." Yeah,
Yeah,
which
that's what it was.
which I love that too because that could I've actually well, my parents went on, like, this, like, trip with some of my dad's old work people, and, like, the company he worked at that I was born, so it's, like, 30 years,
Okay.
and so they of him being there. But I was like, "Do they know I'm trans?" Because 'Cause they're,
Mm,
like, not Democrats,
okay.
but they're Orange County Republicans,
Yeah.
which is a whole other thing in Orange County, California, because apparently that's in Florida too, and I'm not
Mm,
from Florida.
mhm.
I just no
Yeah,
offense,
it's
I'm
fine.
not from there.
Careful, my wife's family
Yeah.
is from Florida. No, we have our opinions, but her family's cool. Her
Yeah.
family's good.
I But yeah, so it's that thing of I know I wondered when I was transitioning, how would that impact my parents
Sure.
of telling people they know and nobody's had a problem,
Yeah,
luckily. I don't know if they're correcting pronoun, I don't know what those conversations look like,
right.
but I think seeing the mom handle that because also then it's a learning moment for parents too.
Yes.
That's what you can do,
Yeah,
and I think her upset and frustration that came out
yeah,
in that moment was also tied to, like, is she laid off? But she's so
right.
close. There's so much happening, and she's like, "The last thing I need
Yes,
is you misgender my kid."
correct. It was all wrapped up in those lines right there. All just a accumulation of all of the circumstances and knowing
Mhm.
that she's responsible for her son too, right? And I feel like it's where it came from for sure.
Absolutely, and I think what's cool too is we get glimpses into his personality because, like, that first I don't know if we actually said this, but
Mhm.
that first time where he's, like, eavesdropping on Cat, he's working on a
Yes,
drawing.
he's an artist. Yes,
Mhm.
visual.
And it has, like, Aztec.
Mhm. Like indigenous, Aztec. I mean, it's I wish I was able to find more on exactly Because not to go back to
Yeah.
like the whole name thing, but like whenever
Mhm.
I approach a character in my own work as an actor, I always like looking up the names and their
Mm.
meanings of names and why did the writer choose those names. So I was looking up the meanings. I know
Yeah,
it's really interesting, but it's kind of a tangent.
yeah. No, I agree. I think it's interesting because we'll get into the importance of that painting, but it was something where we're like, okay, this kid's
Yeah.
Indigenous, Raúl. It paints a character that we don't get to like, you know, because he's not the main character at the end of the
No,
day.
no, but to even
Um,
introduce that and even have that as a presence to me is powerful. Like, to me,
yeah.
like, knowing, like, that's to, like, my ancestors and, like,
Mm,
my background, I was just like, "How awesome." That is so cool to see
mhm,
that because I have my own curiosity of, like, my own Indigenous ancestry and background, and yeah, so you're right. I feel like I don't know. I don't know if they were, like, leaders or warriors or like something like that. But I think one does look like a parental figure or a figure of
mm.
status protecting. Like there's like right a lot of like protection of
There is, yeah.
a young person.
Yeah, she is there's, like, a babe, and then it's, like, a two-headed dragon, which because I looked up a screenshot because I was really trying to
Hmm.
see if anyone wrote about it to get more in depth, and I really couldn't
Yeah.
find anything. But they actually represent the Claxtons, and so if you look at because the Claxtons all have this crazy blonde hair. The
Yes.
mom, I don't know what okay, can we just talk about how wrecked the mom
Yeah.
looks?
Mom is going through it.
I mean, wild mascara, quasi, like, almost dreads, and the mom is
Yeah,
white, so she shouldn't be having those.
yeah. Wild.
Like, it's just her hair
Appropriation,
is a
correct.
mess, right?
No, girls.
I feel like she does strike me as the type of white woman who's like, "Well, my husband's black, so I can do this," and it's
Right,
like,
and that could have been the commentary. It could have been.
I yeah, but I was like, "Girl, you are rich. Like, why are you like, do your make" like, you
Listen
know?
listen, okay? We can't judge, we can't judge.
Oh, I was watching with my girlfriend, and she was like,
What
what"
is
like, I think she had to pause it, and she's like, "What is happening?" I
what
was like I think she actually clocked it first. I was like, "What do you mean?" Like, "Her mascara is crazy," and then she paused it, and she's like, "Look at it." I was like, "Wow."
It is. It's like it's runny, it's clumpy.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
is like, it's fun. It's part of that
it is.
kid-like,
Of of
surrealism,
course, and leaning into
and
that just the personality of this character, you know?
exactly, yeah, and yeah, I guess the rule of 3 is a third trans moment. But there's things where we see him painting on top of roofs, and we're like,
Mhm.
you know, he's, like, projecting his like,
Yes,
what he was
which
drawing
is
onto the
so
roof.
cool. Can we talk about that invention?
Yeah.
This and like, geez, a jack of all trades.
Yeah, inventor, artist. He's so interesting and cool, and he definitely feels like kind of a cool I feel like if I was a kid growing up, I'd be like, "Ah, he's so cool. He, like, invents. He's an artist."
Absolutely. Talk like, you know, in the panel when you're like, what's a character that really resonated with you growing up that was like transcoded or trans mask?
Yeah.
Like if that existed when I was a kid, like I would have
Mhm.
been like Raul.
Yeah,
Yeah. But you
yeah,
said the
and so
threes, right? Like what's the third
yeah.
moment?
Well, I guess we kinda buried a little bit of the act like, literally the plot, not to be punny, because the dead come up back
Sure.
to life. But so Kat ends up finding out that she is something called a Hell Maiden,
Yes.
and so she has access to these demons and Wendell and Wild, so that is the Wendell and Wild that
Yes.
hopefully you went and watched the movie, so this only makes more sense.
Right.
And it's hilarious because they find out that their father, who is a you find out he's their father later, but he's like the king of demons. He's like
Mhm.
so gigantic that they live on his head and his hair is like
Yes.
a tree
Right.
to
And
them.
in the nose.
And they stay in the nose. Yeah, that's where they sleep. And they use this hair cream.
Yes.
They've been punished, so they're on hair duty because dad's vain.
Yes.
And
Aren't they kind of
they
mess ups and, like, disappointments a little bit,
yeah,
right?
they're definitely the outsider
Yeah.
mess, like, they mess something up, and they accidentally find out that their dad's hair growing cream can bring things back to life because there's, like, a tick
Right.
that they kill, and then the cream hits it, and, like, it brings it back to life,
Right.
and they're like, "This is wild." not to be punny,
Yes.
because their dream actually is to build a carnival,
Yeah.
which is very cute.
Yeah, we
But their dad has the demon carnival, like,
correct.
that tortures the souls, kind of.
Right. They have their
Um,
own dreams, though.
yeah, and so Kat ends up being mentored by a nun called Sister Helly,
Yes.
which it wasn't until I wrote it down that I was like, "Oh,
Hell,
Helly."
yes.
Yeah, who you find out is also a Hell Maiden
Right.
and becomes kind of like a maternal figure, and of course, like, she's like, "Don't use your ability," like, the whole, like, "Don't do anything," and then, of course, she does. Kat does all the things because
Yeah,
she's rebellious and
of
punky, and
course.
so Kat finds out she's a Hell Maiden, which is basically she can summon or control demons, and in her dream, she's basically introduced to Wendell Wild,
Mhm.
and they like, because she's like, why would I want demons? But they basically make the promise that they don't know if it's actually going to work, that they can bring her parents back from the dead
Yes, with the hair cream.
with the hair cream. And so at this point, by the way, like, Kat and Raúl are on their, like, way to becoming friends, but she keeps being like, we're not friends. But,
She
like,
is playing a little, like, closed off.
yeah, and he's just kind of like, that's fine. Like, you're asking me to come with you to your parents' grave to resurrect them. Okay, I'll come support you, even
Yeah,
though you keep saying we're not friends.
right. No.
Because even there was that moment where I think there was something she did that made him laugh in class, where like she first like came in and then he kind of laughed and she's like, "We're not friends," and like she didn't like did this like too cool for school kind of girl, and like he was like, "Oh yeah, I like that. Like that's cool."
Raul was just going along with it, even though, like, Kat's being a little kinda, like, standoffish.
Yeah, and it's a cool parallel that I think, the creative team did on purpose. Because even though Kat is like, "We're not friends. This isn't vulnerable," and it's, like, literally going to your parents' graves for the first
Right,
time
right.
because she's left the town and, like, bringing Raul like, she asks, like, if he could go.
Mhm.
On the way, he shares a little piece of himself too,
Yes,
like, he's meeting her vulnerability with some vulnerability.
yes. So, in this exchange, in this heart to heart meeting vulnerability with vulnerability, Raul takes an opportunity to share a little bit more about like pre transition life and has photo, right? A photo
Mhm,
which is of him alongside the poodles, those three girls. And it's not a traumatic thing. And I think it is a pivotal and important kind of point or like plot point to share because not all trans people do feel, ashamed of their past. And I
mhm.
think again back to like how this is helpful for youth or trans youth specifically is being able to see a moment like that and know that it doesn't have to be like that. Right? Like,
Yeah.
there doesn't have to be so much pain and suffering and shame. There might be those points and those feelings, but it doesn't have to be that all the time forever.
Yeah, and I think it's as someone who has older parents, something I've thought about is most of my photo, like, because I went to a friend's parents, her mom's funeral a few, like,
Oh, yeah.
4 or 5 minutes, like, it was 4 or 5 months ago, but
Okay.
I was like, some of the photos had her
Oh,
pre-transition
wow.
in them,
Right.
and I mean, she put it together and everything. So I think, but I kind of thought about how, like, oh yeah, most of my photos with my family, like, are pre-transition, like,
Right.
those are still memories.
Memories.
Um,
Yeah. But everyone has
yeah,
a different relationship, and I'm not
yeah,
saying right, I'm not advocating for one or the other. It's just there's
yeah.
options, and I think that's just important to remember, and it's a choice.
It is, yeah, and also but that's the thing, it's a choice, and Raul was the
Yeah.
one who chose to show the photo.
Correct. Exactly.
Mhm,
I feel like I do that a
yeah,
lot. I will share my name that I was given at birth,
mhm,
I will show and share photos, but that is a personal choice.
yeah. I think it's powerful to have, like, just a different, like, there's not one trans
Not at
experience,
all.
and that's why having, like, the majority of trans representation being white, trans, feminine people who tend to be binary and straight, right? It's that's not enough. That's only one lived experience.
Exactly. So then after Raul takes out this picture, Kat's response is asking, "You were a poodle too?" And Raúl says, "Yeah, I tried to be." And this is an example of him struggling, right? Like, it's a good lesson for cis people to recognize and see, where it's a young trans person who's struggling to conform to what society expects of his sex assigned at birth, but he realized that he could make choices, and he chooses to be happy and prioritize his happiness and be alone, which, if that means isolating himself and not having friends or a community, he'd much prefer to just be authentic, live his truth and be himself. And,
Mm,
I think that's a real thing for trans people sometimes. It's like, when you do make these choices and you do transition, like, the loss that occurs sometimes. But again, prioritizing number one, the self, in order to be happy. One of my friends once said, like, happiness is our birthright or your birthright.
mm.
And that's
I
what
love that.
Raul did. And it's not about attention or trying to be cool or interesting or for a lack of exploring gender expression.
Yeah, I think that's something where, like, unfortunately, like, obviously this isn't a political podcast, we're not experts in that,
No.
but you do have people who are constantly saying, like, that's what people are saying, like, it's just because it's trendy, it's just you want attention, it's
Mhm.
like, you know people are like, whatever. I don't listen to conservatives about, or like transphobic people about that stuff, so I don't exactly know what they're saying. But I also think it is nice to kind of be like, no, it's just people are willing to sacrifice certain things. They're not doing it to gain it, like,
Right.
other besides like gaining connection and authenticity with themselves.
Yeah.
They're not doing it like, "You think we wanna do this? We wanna cut
Right.
ourselves and, like, poke needles in us
Of
constantly, or, like,
course.
have society try to take our rights away?"
Right. Exactly.
But, yeah. One of the things I think is actually, interesting and cool about that moment is it's, like, a way to be, like, navigating the transness as well, but then it gives Raul, like, a rich backstory, but also a backstory that is common in teens, which is the main character,
Mhm,
Kat,
mhm.
comes and meets their new, basically best friend,
Bruh.
Raul, who used to be friends with the popular clique, but is now the outsider.
Mhm.
And we see this type of narrative. I mean, the most obvious one that comes to mind is Janice Ian from Mean
Mhm.
Girls. This is like, this is her story, not
Eh,
literally, it's her backstory to a degree.
right.
And what I thought was really interesting was, like, I wanted to kind of talk about how, like, originally when I was researching, I was like, this isn't just a trans specific narrative. Like, a lot of teens go through that where, like, oh, I used to be friends with them. How many times have you heard that in any teen thing? I used to be friends with them and then they got
1000%.
popular. They got
Right. Or
cool.
and they became bullies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is, like, I was trying to find more male characters
Mm,
that had that similar narrative, like cis male
interesting.
characters, because I originally was planning to be like, this is similar, like Janice Ian from Mean Girls, and
Right.
then insert male character from
But
this.
there's no real comps.
I couldn't find one that was similar. Like, I was Googling and it's like, well, Daria. It's like, well, Daria is a female
Right.
character. And like, it came kind of close, like Freaks and Geeks. I actually haven't seen it, so I can't speak to it too
Okay.
much. But there's apparently these characters, Neil and Bill, who are losing a friend to a popular crowd.
Mm,
But every time it kind of came up with like a reference, like that was in the character's backstory, it was either for male characters, it was either this is actively the plot of the movie
mhm,
or that somebody is moving out of, transitioning for lack of a better word,
mhm.
into like a different clique, or it made them like the dangerous bad boy, like Patrick from 10 Things I Hate About
Oh,
You,
yeah.
or Jesse from Gilmore
Mhm.
Girls, which later that's kind of alluded to in his seasons. And I thought that was interesting because at first I was being like, are my searches transphobic? Why is this? I was
Mhm.
like mad that I couldn't find an equivalent. But then I was like, actually, it's really interesting because it kind of makes it feel like more of a trans masculine experience.
Right.
But it made me think, like, recently, just last week, my girlfriend and I, we were watching Unknown Number, the high school catfish, which is it's a new Netflix
Okay,
documentary.
it's a new Netflix documentary, okay.
And basically, this girl is being cyberbullied like crazy through texts, and it's like through a random number generator. They can't like deal with it, and it's very like it's a group chat with her and her boyfriend
Mhm.
of them being like, you're so ugly, like, he's gonna break up with you, that kinda stuff,
Wait, I
and
think my wife watched this one.
it was
There's a
wild.
twist, isn't there? About who
Yeah,
it was?
we
Yeah.
didn't see it coming, and I mean, it's a news story, so maybe
Right,
some
right,
people
right.
obviously people knew, but, like, we
Yeah.
didn't. It's insane. It's actually because 'cause you're trying to figure it out,
Mhm.
and then I actually wanna watch it again
Yeah.
to see like a mystery, right?
Mhm.
But something they said that was interesting was, like, her and her boyfriend and they're only, like, 13 or 14 when
Mm.
this was happening. It's, like, pretty, like, sad.
Young babies.
I
Yeah.
know, but they were like, "Well, it's probably a girl because guys don't do this type of thing," and I
Mm.
was just like, "That's really interesting, like, the psychological warfare that they
Mm.
always talk about that girls do."
Like the bullying, the cyberbullying of it all.
Yeah, and just, like and I think that's a really like and I don't know if that's true that only I didn't grow up as, like, a teen boy, I don't
Yeah,
know, but,
right.
like, everyone has always said boys don't deal with that, like, they just do sports, they don't care, they're not as complicated and or as
Interesting,
complex.
interesting.
Yeah, and so with life imitating art or art imitating life, because I think the question then becomes, do cis boys not deal with this?
Mm.
Like, this whole, like, I used to be friends with them and, like, I tried to be in the popular group and I couldn't do it, now I'm an outcast. Or is there a gap in representation
Mm.
of this male experience?
Ooh.
Right? Because, like, you have guys who are like, not to get all like men are great at gaslighting, but,
Right.
like, it's not like there's never been a male, cis male in his life that's never dealt with drama or that
Of
kinda stuff, right?
course, yeah.
So I think it's interesting because on the one hand, is this, like, a specifically trans masculine experience, right?
Mm.
Because there is a reality that we went through different experiences, life experiences than cis men, especially depending on what age someone
Right.
transitions, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it also shows how through trans people, cis people can find more narratives and different types of masculinity
Mhm.
to identify with. Because, like, just because we don't see it in
Yes.
film and TV
Doesn't mean it
doesn't
doesn't
mean
exist. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And then when you have, like, kids who are only watching content and they're like, and don't worry, like, the police get involved very early on, so that it's not just 2 13-year-olds trying to figure this out, but,
Yeah.
like, the fact that they're like, "Well, we're going to eliminate 50% of the suspects because we have a preconceived notion of how people interact,"
Mhm.
right? It's just is it and, like, I don't know. I don't know if that's how like, I wasn't a cis
Nor
boy
was
growing
I.
up.
You're right. So we don't have that lived experience, and I don't know any teen boys that I could be like, "Does this happen?"
Right, yeah, and I think yeah, and also I can't even imagine being a kid with social
Yeah.
media, my goodness.
Right.
But that's what I thought was so interesting about it was I'm like, I couldn't find
Mm.
any cis male
In those
narratives that
spaces,
were
right. Mhm.
yeah, and so I'm like yeah, so I'm like either so that's like why I think that's so cool because it shows how trans people can break down these barriers and give cis people other ways to also view gender.
Mhm.
But then also it kind of makes it potentially a uniquely trans masculine story too.
Absolutely. I think all of the moments we talked about, what of the peppering of, like, the way we're learning of Raúl and his transness, again, like we said earlier, it's not just about that. There's actually more to Raúl that is helping push the story forward, and he plays a very pivotal role in the plot. And
Mm,
yes, like, I love this, like, not a sidekick, like, he actually matters in the narrative as a
mm.
whole, right? Like, yes, we're saying he was a supporting character, but progresses the plot with a lot of things, actually. What's, like, one of the
Yeah.
ones that stood out to you?
Well, I think the big one was so Wendell and Wild so they end up tricking Kat into thinking like into basically becoming their servant.
Mhm.
And a big part of their deal with Kat for her to do what they need her to do is that they promise to bring back her parents.
Mhm.
But early in the film, the Claxtons murder the principal.
Yes.
Wendell and Wild then experiment on him and bring him back to life
Right, right.
first. And they need to get a bunch of money for Wendell and Wild for their fantasy,
Scream
like
Fair.
yeah, their screen fair they
Yeah,
wanna make.
yeah.
And so the principal ends up kind of like working with them probably to save his own skin because there's a comment made early on that the only way the Claxons could get the vote to like from the city council, which also the importance of local politics, hello,
Mhm.
to give them the land for these private prisons would be if the old council voted.
Yeah.
And so they make a deal for
Yes.
like a ton of cash because he needs money for the school too.
Right.
So he's still dedicated to the school, even in death. The part of the deal is that they cannot bring anyone else back from the dead,
Right.
especially the people who own the brewery that burned down.
Right.
That's part of the contract basically that is going on. So Wendell and Wild are dealing with that they can't bring back Kat's parents, but they want to bring like they because they want the money. And Raul decides in the chaos of everything to go and bring her parents back to life.
Yeah.
And so it's out of like, this is what my friend wants,
Mm.
it's what I need, but also it causes a lot of conflict. Like that,
Mhm.
and that's like a good script, right? Where things keep falling apart,
Right.
things keep aren't like happening the way you want things to happen, right?
Mhm.
And so that's I think a huge one of like I think one of the big first or
Right.
like early ways that he adds to the plot.
Mhm. I mean, that's a great one. It's like like you're saying, the earliest one and the biggest one, I would say.
Mhm.
And then there's like these other moments that happen. We talked a little bit about the mural.
Yeah. Well, we didn't get too much into like do you want to tell him like
Yeah.
how important because this is like boss battle, like daddy's upset.
Yes.
He's
Yes.
tempted to like basically kill everybody.
Right.
That's kind of and there's no way they can fight him.
No. But then because the mural becomes projected up into the sky, that stops him in his tracks, and I think he's so, like, moved by it and almost, like, has this like, quick change of heart because of what the picture is depicting, which is, again, like
Mhm.
that parental figure protecting their offspring, and I think he realizes something in that moment.
Yeah, he definitely is like, okay, I'm a father. Like I shouldn't be about to smush my children in my hand. And something that comes up is that all his children that he sends out into the demon world, they don't come back. And he's like, is this my fault? Am I a bad?
Mhm.
Like he has like an existential crisis. Literally without that really
Piece
beautiful
of art.
Aztec,
Yeah.
yeah, Mesoamerican style piece of art that Raul created, everyone would be dead.
Right.
Like, they will all just be
Right,
dead.
and so that's the arc of this shy
Mhm.
trans boy who becomes the hero.
Yeah, he saved the day, and again, it's such a well-written story because this is like this like the whole every single thing is like about family, right?
Mhm.
Like Kat is trying to get her family protects you, it should be there. And I can also what it is interesting actually, I'm just kind of thinking of is that Kat has chosen family. Raul
Yeah,
has his mom.
right.
It's one of those things because Sister Helly like steps in kind of as like her maternal figure,
Mhm.
but it is something where his like parallel like theme of family is his mom's been protecting
Yeah.
him every step of the way,
Mhm.
right? And it's not this trans trauma of being kicked out, not
No.
being accepted,
Mm-mm.
and it ties in perfectly with the theme of the movie and is also like you said, it makes him the hero. It's what saves the day, and I think that's also, like, really awesome to see, like, how art literally can, like, save.
Yes, art saves lives, and art
Mhm.
creates family, and it can be chosen family sometimes too. I always
Yeah.
think about that.
So I guess almost kind of wrapping up sort of like a panel in a way. I think the cool question becomes what does a character like Raul make possible
Mm.
to have a not tokenized, not tragic trans character who is actually this full dimensional being who has trans moments sprinkled in.
Mhm. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
like it's the perfect example of what
Mhm.
I'm constantly asking for or wishing there was more of,
Yeah.
again, the way it's normalized being trans and these moments are full of care and also are very realistic. considering we struggle to be like, what is a horror film that exists that has trans masc rep?
That's true. We really were trying to find stuff, and there's a couple shout outs, like, especially, like, if you're a little, like, older
Mm-hmm.
and you're into, like, more graphic horror, there's They/Them with your Jermaine as not the main character. Like, it kind of felt like it was a little marketed that way, but a very prominent and important character because it's more of an ensemble cast, which
Mm-hmm.
is great. Who is trans mask they them. And then if you're into like really like horror,
Right, and a pretty, like, dark, like, sided
yeah,
themes. There is
yeah,
a film called Strange Circus, which is, like, a Japanese foreign film, but
yeah,
it's, like, really dealing with some heavier themes and topics, so for more of a, like, a mature crowd, like
yeah, like
incest,
trigger
murder,
warning.
yeah, trigger
Yeah,
warning,
yeah.
there's a few topics there.
So they're out there, but it is something that it's interesting because there is I think there's such a big overlap in trans or like queerness and horror
Mhm.
because a lot of the times the character is isolated or they're the
Yeah.
outsider or something's happening. And like I think there's a reason why Megan became a queer icon, right?
Mhm.
There's so much that you're like because I was like, how is this doll a queer icon? I watched them like, yeah, it totally makes
Mm.
sense. Because it is interesting that a whole genre like we don't really see a lot of trans masc or queer people where I feel like almost every trans masc I know like loves horror. Like,
Right.
like it's and people all people love horror and spooky and ooky depending on your level of like Halloweenish stuff you're
Mhm.
into. What's really great about this existing is like when you're pitching it to people and if people are like, well, I don't know if that would work, you have a reference like, well,
Mhm.
Wendell Wild did it great.
Yeah.
It has been like 3 years.
Right.
Granted, we've had double strikes, the
Yeah,
fires in LA. There's been a lot
of
happening,
course.
so maybe that's part of the reason, but I think it is a question of like, we knew early on we wanted to do like a Halloween
Mhm.
movie breakdown, and so we had to find
Yeah,
a movie.
right. And I mean, I don't know, maybe we missed certain areas of places to research, but
Yeah, please, like, reach out to
yeah.
us if you know of more spooky ooky to horror
Have to be
movies.
mainstream. Like, I think like,
No.
I feel like that's where we could be missing these films
Mhm,
if it is in the indie scene, if it is a short film, if it is, something like that that exists. This is also great because I know this segues into, like I'm saying, other conversations that I know goes
mhm,
beyond, like, when we're just talking about representation and where we can exist and in what
mhm.
genres we can exist in.
Yeah.
So I know we have some like a fun episode to discuss, that topic, but
Yeah, we have a couple, like, I guess, a little, like, teaser breadcrumbs. We have a topic that does get into a little bit about genres, and then we have another holiday special where we're gonna get into
yeah,
some more trans representation because I think there's something interesting about this being holiday themed, right? And being trans and all that. So we have some really interesting interviews too coming up, as well as more discussions like this.
wonderful. Wow, yay.
We did it.
No, but thank you always. In our next episode, we're in conversation with Ryan Casada, singer-songwriter, activist, and the first openly trans performer at Vans Warped Tour. We'll be discussing what it was like to navigate national attention as a young trans musician, how he's learned to balance mental wellness with a demanding career, and why he rejected American Idol and the media storm it brought. Make sure you're following In Full View wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.